is getting ready for 5 key primaries Tuesday, and the results will have national implications. Incumbent Governor Kemp is seeking re-election, but former Georgia Senator David Perdue is trying to cut him off in the Republican primary. Former President Trump has endorsed Perdue, and former Vice President Mike Pence is endorsing Kemp.
I've had a great relationship with Mike Pence. I had a great relationship with President Trump. I've never said anything bad about him. I don't plan on doing that. I'm not mad at him. I think he's just mad at me, and that's something that I can't control.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from Kennesaw, Georgia. Ed, you've been with Governor Kemp recently. Remind everyone why former President Trump is targeting Kemp.
Well, let's go back to 2020 if we must, and that's when it all began. The former president tried to put pressure on Governor Kemp, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, to pressure local election officials to look for about 11,000 votes and change to flip the margins and give him the win here in the Peach State to win back the White House. Of course, Governor Kemp, Secretary of State Raffensperger said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to allow the steal, or they're not going to help stop the steal. And ever since, the current governor has been the former president's archenemy, in essence. He went out and totally threw himself into Georgia's statewide Republican primaries. Convinced former Senator David Perdue, who lost that runoff election, remember, the day before the January 6th attacks, to get into this race to try to knock out the governor. Recent surveys, however, show that Governor Kemp not only staying ahead of the pack, but likely going to easily exceed the 50% runoff threshold tomorrow night and put Senator David Perdue away for good. What does that tell us about national Republican politics? Well, look, for one thing, it shows you if you're a popular statewide candidate and you've got good numbers on your own, you can survive potentially the challenge for former President Trump, especially if you stood against him despite a good economy in this state, decent management of the pandemic, at least according to voters. That's enough to get you reelected. But former president's kept his eye on this one, is not coming back to the state here in the closing days, which is usually a signal he and his team know it's a lost cause. He'll talk virtually with Perdue supporters tonight, but beyond that, you will not see him here in person. Who you will see here in person is former Vice President Mike Pence, and that puts him directly at odds with his former boss. The first time they've done that. Can you, Scott, think of a time that a former president and vice president have been on the opposite side of a political argument or a high-stakes primary like this? I cannot, and it shows you that the ongoing schism and battle in the Republican Party over who's in control and what it should be about will continue vociferously this year into 2024.
Another big figure and name from the 2020 election aftermath is Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, facing a primary as well. Earlier today you spoke with him. Let's take a listen to some of what he told you.
Why should Georgians re-elect you to your job?
Because I'm the first Secretary of State to make sure we have verifiable paper ballots. First Secretary of State to make sure we do a citizenship audit to make sure only American citizens are on our voter rolls.
I mean, is that the number one issue you've heard from voters, election integrity or election issues?
Well, I want to make sure also that they understand when we lost a World Series game, or we lost, the All-Star game. We won the World Series game, but we lost the All-Star game because people said we were suppressing the vote. We didn't have all these opportunities to vote. We actually increased it. We also made sure that we had photo ID for absentee voting. By having photo ID for absentee voting, what we've done is shored up confidence in the system because we've enhanced security. And that's a win-win for voters. And that's why you're seeing, I think, record turnout. People know their vote counts.
He's being challenged by an incumbent member of Congress. This is a significant challenge, but why is this a significant race nationally?
That's right. Normally, Scott, you and I wouldn't be spending any time worrying about a Secretary of State race in any old state, but Brad Raffensperger took the wrath of the former president and his operation in the wake of the 2020 results. People may remember that audio of a phone call that the former president, Mark Meadows, made to Georgia election officials saying, "Find me about 11,000 votes and change." Well, Raffensperger and his team were on that call, and it was he who stood in there and said, no, the people of Georgia have voted. We're going with these results. We're going to certify this election as is. He's faced the music from Republicans across the country ever since. But he told me today he has met with any group of Republicans who want to hear from him, and he tells them, look, I stand for the truth. And we fixed the voting laws in this state. It's easy to vote. It's hard to cheat. And that's the way elections should be run. He says he fully expects the results to be accepted by those that are running because he knows that the elections will be run cleanly. And that's what his job's about. that the former president got engaged and convinced Congressman Heiss to run against him and probably force him into a runoff election, or Raffensperger will just get over that 50% mark, depending on turnout tomorrow, is, again, another sign that two people who stood up to the former president, the leader of their party, were able to prevail, not only because they did that, but because, in the view of Republican primary voters, in this state at least, they did their job, and they did it well, and they deserve re-election.
And how about this? The race we haven't been talking about much is a U.S. Senate primary, with the balance of power in the Senate hanging in the balance. How is the Senate candidate Herschel Walker running away with this so much? And I'm sorry for the pun.
Well, no, let's embrace that pun. He's been handed the ball, and he's running all the way to the end zone, the former running back is. And he is a hero in this state, of course, as a former University of Georgia player. He cleared the primary field mightily, easily. He does have opponents. They are running advertising, but it looks like he's going to also clear the runoff tomorrow and easily win his race. And he, too, is a hand-picked candidate by the former president. He was convinced to move back to the state, to get involved in this after being a surrogate for the former president over the course of his 4 years in the White House. We haven't been talking about it much yet, Scott, but we will be talking about this race going into the fall. The Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker race will be one of the most expensive, divisive, and decisive contests this year to determine the balance of power in the Senate. Remember, it was the two special elections in the Georgia Senate races in early January 2021 that determined the balance of power of the Senate. The race here again, because Raphael Warnock, remember, is filling out a term of Johnny Isaacson. It's definitely the one to watch. We'll obviously be watching ones in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, a few other places. But this one, given the two men that will be running against each other, given the fact that Democrats continue to try to push this state into the blue column, it will be one where we are spending a lot of time, money, and focus going into November.
Second time in less than 2 years, the eyes of national politics right there on Georgia. That's where Ed O'Keefe is tonight. Ed O'Keefe, thanks so much.